Rosie has never learned to say no. Not to that last glass of wine during the servants' celebration in the palace kitchens. Not to the furious housekeeper demanding someone deliver refreshments to a noble guest immediately, and definitely not when the other giggling maids dare her to confess, "I love you," to the First Lord she meets. Because everyone knows boring Rosie would never. Summer heat presses the stone walls until the air itself feels thick and syrupy. Torchlight flickers over sweating faces, stolen bottles glinting like contraband. The kitchen's smell of spilled vintage, warm bread crusts, and the faint metallic tang of rebellion. Laughter bounces off the low ceiling, louder than it has any right to be. Marta shoves another goblet into Rosie's palm. Drink. Tonight you stop being the girl everyone forgets to notice. The wine is dark cherry, smoky, too strong. It slides down Rosie's throat and lights a reckless ember behind her ribs. For once, the constant inner voice, "Don't disappoint, don't make waves, just smile and vanish," sounds very small. Dares ricochet like sparks. "Tell the First Lord you love him," the room roars. Rosie laughs, real laughter that hurts her sides, because the wine makes refusal taste impossible. Anne slides half off her stool, wheezing. Poor Princess Parisa, marrying that monster for the kingdom. They say he had a man's hand cut off for spilling wine on his boot. Maybe she loves him, Rosie offers, charitable even through the buzz. The kitchen erupts again. She laughs with them, already forgetting why. The door bangs open. Miss Harrow stands framed in torchlight, face carved from thunder. A visiting lord in the West Wing requested refreshments an hour ago. No one went. Someone goes now, or wages vanish until winter. Silence drops like a blade. Every head swivels to Rosie. The old reflex rises. Nod, stand, disappear into usefulness. But the wine is louder. She sets the goblet down so hard the stem cracks. "I'll take it," Marta whoops. There she is. Rosie grabs the silver tray before courage can leak away. West Wing, third door on the left. She repeats it like a ward as she hurries through corridors. The palace is an oven. Heat clings to her skin. Wine hums in her veins. The tray grows heavier with every step. She counts doors. 1, 2, 3. She pushes the third door on the right. Silence greets her. The chamber is vast, moonlit marble gleaming like spilled cream. A bath steams in the center, already drawn. Rose petals drifting on the surface, like tiny pink secrets. The water looks impossibly cool against the suffocating night. Rosie stares. They called her boring. Safe, predictable. The word still stings under her ribs like nettles. She sets the tray on a side table with exaggerated care. Fingers find her laces. Fabric whispers to the floor. Cool air kisses bare skin, permission she has never been allowed to accept. She steps in. Water closes around ankles, knees, thighs, waist, breasts, like the embrace she never learned to ask for. She sinks until only her chin rests above the surface and lets out a small, undignified moan of pure bliss. For the first time in her life, Rosie belongs only to this moment. Eyes drift shut. Wine hums. Heat of the day dissolves. The door crashes open. She freezes. He fills the frame like a storm-given flesh, shoulders wide enough to eclipse moonlight, dark hair disordered, storm-gray eyes locked on her naked body with raw, predatory shock. Alpha King Luther, the man whose growl ends wars. His voice rolls out low, dangerous. Who are you? And what the hell are you doing in my bath? Rosie's heart slams against her ribs. Every instinct screams apologize, flee, shrink. But the wine and the dare and 22 years of never choosing herself speak first. She lifts her chin. Water droplets trace slow, glittering paths down her collarbone. She meets those terrifying eyes and smiles, small, reckless, unafraid. You should get in, she says, voice soft but clear. It's lonely in here. The silence that follows feels alive. Luther does not move. Nostrils flare, fingers curl at his sides, as though fighting the urge to step forward or step back. A low sound rumbles in his chest, not anger. Something deeper, hungrier. Rosie's pulse thunders in her ears, but she does not look away. She has spent her whole life saying yes to everyone except herself. Tonight, she has finally said something for herself. And the most dangerous alpha in the realm stares at her like she has just become the only thing worth claiming. His scent hits her then cedar, storm, iron, and something darker that hooks under her skin and pulls. Her breath catches. The bond she does not yet understand hums awake for the first time. Luther had spent the better part of his adult life perfecting stillness that terrified more effectively than any blade. In the map-strewn war room an hour earlier, Lord Carrick had stood rigid, while Luther listened to the report of stolen grain shipments, 40% siphoned from northern garrisons. Carrick's voice never wavered, but his scent soured with fear when Luther finally rose. The room shrank. 50 lashes, Luther said, voice flat as forged steel. Public at dawn, then exile. Carrick exhaled once, relief so sharp it cut the air. Yes, Your Majesty. And fix the inventory system, Luther added, already turning away. If this happens again, the conversation will be different. He felt the room empty behind him like water draining from a cracked basin. No one lingered near him longer than necessary. They never had. Lewis appeared at his elbow as he strode the corridor. Dinner with Princess Parisa begins in 20 minutes, sire. Luther's hand paused fractionally on the parchment he carried. You should probably look less murderous. I don't look murderous. You always look murderous. It's your resting state. Luther exhaled through his nose. This was politics. No one pretended it was romance. He had won 3 wars before 30, emptied council chambers with a glance, become a weapon in human shape, not the sort of man a woman chose for dinner. The east dining room waited in aggressive formality, candles guttering in iron sconces, flowers bleeding color onto white linen. Luther stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, and waited. An hour passed. "She sends apologies," Lewis murmured at last. "Unwell?" Luther's face did not change. He caught his reflection in the darkened glass. Broad shoulders, dark eyes, the faint scar cutting through one brow. Of course she had not come. He left without looking back. His chambers were dark when he pushed the door open. Steam curled from the marble bath in the center. Rose petals drifted on the surface like blood on water. And there was a girl in it, small, pretty, naked, unarmed, looking up at him with genuine, delighted surprise. No one looked at him like that, ever. Luther froze. She breathed, oh, soft and pleased, as though he were a gift delivered to her bath. He glanced over his shoulder, empty corridor, then back. "Who are you?" The question came out quieter than intended, almost strangled. She sighed dreamily. "You have a very nice voice." His brain stuttered. He tried again, layering alpha command into the words this time. "I asked you a question." Her breath caught. Pupils blew wide. A flush climbed her throat that had nothing to do with hot water. Her scent sweetened wine-soaked cherries, kitchen herbs, and sudden, unmistakable interest. "You should get in," she said, voice breathy. Something in Luther's chest cracked like dry timber. He closed his eyes for one heartbeat, searching for reason. When he opened them, she was still there, utterly at ease, as though lounging naked in a stranger's bath were an ordinary Tuesday. She had to be Parisa. The pieces slotted together with brutal clarity. The cancelled dinner. Nerves. Too much wine to settle them. She had come here anyway because they were betrothed. "Princess," he said carefully. She laughed, delighted. "Am I a princess?" "You are not." She drew herself up with tipsy dignity. "Absolutely, my lord, your princess." She tried to stand, tilted sideways. Luther moved before thought finished. Pure protective instinct. His hand shot out, caught her arm before her skull could meet marble. He steadied her, eyes locked resolutely on her face, even as periphery fed him every forbidden detail. Soft curves, water-slick skin, the small dark mole at the corner of her mouth he suddenly, violently wanted to trace with his tongue. He reached for his cloak, wrapped it around her with efficient movements. "Smells nice," she mumbled into the wool. "Like you." His wolf purred deep, possessive satisfaction. She was wrapping herself in his scent, claiming him in the way of mates, even if she did not know what she did. She swayed too much to walk. Luther simply lifted her, one arm under her knees, the other behind her back. Water sluiced off her in silver sheets. She weighed nothing. She curled instantly into his chest, arms looping around his neck, cheek pressed to the frantic thunder beneath his ribs. Every point of contact burned. Warm thighs across his forearm, breasts soft against his shirt, her breath ghosting his throat in small, contented sighs. The mole at her mouth taunted him again, close enough to taste if he bent his head. His control was not infinite. He could feel her heartbeat against his sternum, quick, trusting. Could smell wine, sweetness, and the faint, maddening thread of arousal weaving through her scent. His wolf snarled mine so loudly he tasted copper. He laid her on the wide bed piled with furs. She rolled toward him at once, one hand fisting his shirt, the other patting the space beside her like an invitation. "You're lonely," she whispered, eyes half closed. "I can feel it, like a big, empty room inside your chest. I'm sorry no one came to dinner." Luther went still above her. No one had ever named it aloud. Not his generals, not his council, not the women who approached him with lowered eyes and calculated smiles. They saw the crown, they saw the threat, never the man who waited alone in candlelit halls while the rest of the world celebrated alliances. Her thumb brushed his jaw, clumsy, gentle. "You waited, and nobody came. That's awful." Something behind his ribs cracked wide. He sat on the edge of the mattress. The frame groaned under his weight. She tugged him closer until he was half reclined beside her, cloak and all. Her leg hooked over his thigh. She pressed her cheek to his chest, right above the thunder. "I think," she slurred, voice going sleepy and honest, "I think I love you a little bit already." Isn't that silly? Her eyes fluttered shut. Breathing evened. She slept trusting, warm, wrapped in his scent like she had claimed him back. Luther did not move for hours. He listened to her heartbeat slow against his ribs, felt every tiny shift she made in sleep, fingers tightening in his shirt. A soft sigh when he adjusted the cloak higher around her shoulders. He catalogued the exact weight of her, the exact warmth, the exact way her hair smelled of kitchen herbs and stolen wine. The bond hummed under his skin for the first time, electric, living, undeniable. His mate, this sweet, drunk girl who looked at him without fear, and with something dangerously close to adoration. His wolf settled with a deep, rumbling purr. He would keep her, forever, no matter what it took. Rosie woke inside a cocoon of cedar and storm. Heat radiated from the body curled around hers, broad chest rising slow against her back. One heavy arm draped across her waist like an anchor. The scent wrapped her lungs, sank hooks beneath her ribs, hummed there like a second heartbeat she had not known she was missing. Then memory slammed through her skull. Wine, dare, wrong door, bath, invitation. His arms lifting her from water, her own slurred confession against his throat. "I think I love you a little bit." Terror flooded her veins colder than the marble floor she had fled across last night. She stopped breathing. The arm across her waist tightened fractionally in sleep, instinctive, possessive. She froze. His breath ghosted her nape, steady, warm. The small, dark mole at the corner of her mouth tingled as though his gaze had already found it in the dark, careful, glacial. She slid free inch by inch. Bare feet met cold stone. Her dress lay crumpled where she had dropped it. She dragged it on without lacing, fingers shaking so violently the ties slipped twice. His cloak pooled on the chair. She folded it, neat corners, military precision, because it was his. because even now she could not leave it crumpled. One last look. Moonlight carved his face in silver and shadow. Dark lashes, strong jaw, the faint scar cutting through one brow. Beautiful, terrifying. Already hers in ways she had no right to claim. She slipped through the door before the bond humming under her ribs could pull her back. The servants' quarters smelled of lye soap and yesterday's bread. Morning light sliced through narrow windows. No one glanced twice at her unlaced dress, her tangled hair. "Did you hear?" Marta's voice cut through the clatter. The Alpha King waited an hour for his princess. She never showed. Anne leaned close. West Wing cleared for him, whole place like a tomb. Rosie kept her head down, scrubbing a pot until her knuckles whitened. West Wing, third door on the left. Or had Miss Harrow said west? The memory blurred under wine haze and panic. Two stewards appeared at the doorway. "The king is searching for someone," the first said, voice low and urgent. Desperately. "Who?" "The princess. She went to his chambers last night. Alone. Fell asleep in his bed." The pot slipped from Rosie's fingers, clattered loud against stone. "The princess? Drunk?" the second steward whispered, shocked. Stumbling. And the king found her in his bath, naked. Nausea surged up Rosie's throat. She gripped the table edge until wood creaked. West Wing. Third door. She had bathed in the Alpha King's bath. Asked the Alpha King to join her. Slept wrapped in his arms. He was tearing the palace apart looking for his fiancée. A small sound escaped her, half whimper, half gasp. She bolted. The small courtyard behind the laundry buildings smelled of sun-warmed stone and damp linen. Rosie pressed her back to the wall, lungs burning, pulse hammering so hard she tasted iron. "There you are." The voice sliced clean through the morning air. Rosie spun. Princess Parisa stood in the archway, tall, pale, elegant as winter marble, hair pinned with diamonds that caught light like frost. Eyes the color of steel under ice. The resemblance was uncanny. Same height, same coloring, same delicate jaw. But where Rosie had the small dark mole at the corner of her mouth, Paris's skin was flawless. "I know what you did last night." Rosie's mouth went dry. "Your Highness, you drank too much wine." Parisa stepped closer, her scent jasmine, cold steel pushed the air thinner. "You entered restricted chambers. You got into his bath, except it was not some visiting lord's bath. It was King Luther's, my betrothed." Rosie's knees buckled. She dropped to stone. Parisa tilted her head. The faintest hint of disbelief crossed her face. Like Rosie, was an insect that had unexpectedly bitten. "You committed theft," she continued, counting on elegant fingers. "That vintage belongs to the royal cellars. Trespass in royal quarters. Impersonation of a royal personage. He called you princess, and you confirmed it. Depending on how my father interprets the matter, treason." Rosie's stomach heaved. Bile burned her throat. Parisa crouched, graceful, predatory, until their eyes were level. "When the truth emerges," she said softly, "there will be consequences. At minimum, You will never work in a noble house again. More likely work camps, prison, a pause, or if my father is in a punitive mood, hanging. Rosie stifled a cry. The sound came out raw. Parisa looked at her nails, but there might be another option. Hope flared, painful, bright, stupid. Anything, Rosie whispered. Parisa's lips curved. Not a smile. A blade unsheathed. Good. She rose in one fluid motion. You will impersonate me. You will court him. You will make him end this engagement himself. My father will never accept refusal from me. It would be disobedience, endangerment of the alliance. Luther must be the one to walk away. Rosie's pulse roared in her ears. And when the truth comes out, she managed. Parisa's gaze flicked to the mole at Rosie's mouth. Disdain so pure it felt physical. I will protect you as best I can, she said. But I cannot promise safety. Only time. Rosie's hands shook so hard she hid them in her skirts. Parisa stepped closer still. Close enough that Rosie could see the faint frost glittering in her eyes. You look enough like me in candlelight. Same height, same coloring, same unfortunate little mark. One gloved finger brushed the mole at Rosie's mouth, light as breath, cold as execution. In a hurried audience, he will not question it. Not at first. Rosie flinched. Parisa's voice dropped to silk over steel. Do this, and the charges disappear. Refuse, and I tell my father exactly who slept in the Alpha King's bed last night. A maid, a liar. He does not forgive deception. The courtyard tilted. Rosie tasted bile again. Parisa waited, perfectly still, perfectly patient. Rosie thought of work camps, prison, the news, the look on Luther's face when he learned the girl who had called him lonely was nobody. The shame that would replace the wonder in his eyes. She thought of saying no for the first time in her life and watching everything collapse anyway. Her voice came out small. And when he discovers the truth, Parisa looked away toward the sun-warmed stone. I will do what I must, but love makes fools of us all. A beat of silence. Rosie closed her eyes. I'll do it, she whispered. The words tasted like ash. Parisa's shoulders dropped a fraction, relief, guilt, both at once. She reached into her sleeve, produced a small velvet pouch. Tonight you dine with him as me. Dress, rosewater, try not to curtsy like a startled foal. She pressed the pouch into Rosie's trembling palm. Do not fail, for both our sakes. She turned to leave. Rosie's voice stopped her. Your Highness, if he finds out before you're ready, will you stand between us? Parisa looked back. Eyes glistening for the first time, not with tears, but with something colder. If I can, she said quietly, but girls like you are always the first to burn. She was gone. Rosie stood alone in the courtyard. Dawn light strengthened. Dust motes danced in the beams like tiny witnesses. She opened the pouch. Gold glinted. Rosewater smelled like grief. She lifted Luther's cloak to her face one last time, inhaled cedar and storm and the faint trace of safety. She folded it with military precision, the same way she had left it on his bed. and set it on the stone bench like a farewell. Then she walked toward the servants' stair, head high, steps deliberate, even though every inch of her wanted to run the other way. She had chosen again, and this time the choice might cost her everything. Rosie stood in the princess's dressing chamber, while Paris's maids transformed her into something she was not. Silk whispered over her skin. The emerald gown clung too tightly across her breasts, the corset lacing viciously in front. Each tug forced her spine straighter, her breath shallower. Rosewater drowned the faint wine still clinging to her scent, but it could not erase the memory of cedar and storm. She stared at the mirror and saw a stranger wearing her face, expensive, polished, hollow. A soft knock. The door opened. Parisa entered alone. No entourage, just the quiet click of the latch and the sudden drop in temperature. She studied Rosie for a long moment, head tilted, expression unreadable. "You'll do," she said at last. Flat, final. Then softer, colder. "He will not see the lie tonight. The candles are low. The wine will be strong. Keep your answers short. Smile when he looks at you like you are the only star in his sky. And whatever you do," her voice cracked on the next word like a whip, "do not let him touch your face." Rosie's throat closed. She remembered Luther's thumb tracing her jaw in the dark. The way his breath had stuttered when she called him lonely. "Why not?" she asked, voice hoarse. "Because that is how he memorizes people," Parisa said. "He touches once and never forgets." The words landed like cold coins. Parisa stepped closer. Close enough that Rosie could smell jasmine and frost, and the sharp edge of fear beneath aristocratic calm. If he asks about the betrothal gift, blame politics. If he asks why you drank so much last night, tell him you were afraid of him. A pause. That part won't be a lie. She pressed a tiny glass vial into Rosie's palm. "Laudanum. 3 drops in his wine if he grows intense. Mercy for both of you." Rosie stared at the vial as though it might bite. "I'm not poisoning him." "It is not poison," Parisa replied, patient as a blade. "It is survival." A gong sounded deep in the palace. Dinner. Rosie walked to the great hall on legs that no longer felt hers. Hundreds of candles burned. Light danced across marble and gold until the room shimmered like the inside of a flame. Music drifted soft strings, a lonely cello. Nobles murmured behind fans. Luther sat alone at the high table. Black velvet, silver wolf clasp at his throat. Hands braced on the arms of his chair, as though holding himself in place by will alone. When Rosie stepped through the arched doorway, every head turned. Silence fell. Luther lifted his gaze. Their eyes met across the long room. For one heartbeat, the world narrowed to candlelight, held breath, and the faint thread of cedar cutting through rosewater. He rose, slowly, deliberately. He crossed the floor in long, unhurried strides. Nobles parted before him like water before a ship. When he reached her, he stopped close, too close. She saw the faint scar through his left eyebrow, the way his pupils had blown wide. "Princess, he said, low, rough, for her ears alone. Rosie swallowed. Your Majesty. He offered his hand. She placed hers in it, his fingers closed, warm, careful, enormous. And the contact sent a jolt straight through the humming thread beneath her ribs. He led her to the high table. They sat. He leaned in until his breath brushed her ear. I thought you might not come. Rosie forced the smile Parisa had practiced with her, small, mysterious, royal. I almost didn't. His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist. Once. Deliberate. Then I am twice blessed tonight. Her pulse slammed against his fingertip. The first course arrived, quail glazed in honey, figs split open like tiny hearts. He served her himself. A single slice of fruit placed on her plate. His fingers lingered near hers. Eat, he said softly. You look like you haven't slept. She met his eyes. I haven't. Neither have I, he admitted. Quiet. Honest. Since the moment you left my bed. The words rippled through her chest. She reached for her goblet, fingers trembling. Wine tasted like summer cherries and guilt. Across the table, a lord cleared his throat. Your Majesty, the court has heard rumors of a midnight visitor to your chambers, a woman bold enough to. Luther's head turned. The motion was slow. The temperature in the hall dropped 10 degrees. Speak her name with anything less than reverence again, he said, voice calm, lethal, and I will feed what remains of your tongue to the ravens. Silence swallowed the room. Luther turned back to her. His expression softened. Only for her. Forgive them, he murmured. They fear what they cannot control. She forced herself to meet his eyes. And what do you fear, my lord? He studied her for a long moment, then quiet, almost wondering. Losing the only person who ever saw me lonely and stayed. Her breath caught. The bond hummed stronger beneath her ribs, a living thread pulling tight. Dessert arrived in waves, cakes, pastries, small dishes of cream, glazed fruit, chocolate. An unreasonable amount. Rosie's eyes moved across the selection. For the first time all evening, something in her face eased. She reached for a small spoon with the confidence of familiar ground. Tried the cake first. Closed her eyes. Made the same breathy, pleased sound she had made when his thumb grazed her lip. Luther's grip tightened on the arms of his chair until wood creaked. The nervousness dissolved. This was the girl from the bath, warm, real, unguarded. She licked cream from her bottom lip. Luther's wolf snarled inside him, hungry, possessive. He cleared his throat. He was going to do this right, even if it killed him. Rosie looked up at him over another spoonful of cake, the small dark mole at the corner of her mouth, catching candlelight like an invitation he was not allowed to accept. The bond between them thrummed louder now, electric, undeniable, dangerous. And somewhere in the palace, the real Princess Parisa waited to hear whether her borrowed maid had begun the work of breaking the Alpha King's heart, or whether she had already started to lose her own. The next morning, the garden paths shimmered under relentless sun. Paris's maids had cinched Rosie into another gown, this one pale green, the color of new leaves after rain. The corset laced brutally tight across her fuller breasts, each breath a shallow victory. Rosie took Luther's arm at the entrance to the rose walk. His forearm felt like warm iron beneath her fingers, even through layers of silk. His scent wrapped around her, cedar, storm, and the faint metallic edge of restrained power. They walked. He matched his stride to hers without comment, a courtesy no one had ever offered the girl who once carried laundry for half the palace. Heat pressed down. The bond beneath her ribs hummed louder now, a living thread tugging with every heartbeat. "Are you enjoying the gardens?" he asked, voice lowered to that private register that made her wolf stir. "Yes," she managed. "They're lovely. Not as lovely as you." The words landed soft, yet they struck like a spark on dry tinder. Rosie's breath hitched. The corset dug harder. Her vision began to spot at the edges. They turned down a narrow path. Servants fell back, granting privacy. The air grew thicker. Her steps faltered. The world tilted. "Princess." Luther's arm snapped around her waist before her knees gave way. He pulled her flush against his chest. The contact burned every inch of her pressed to solid muscle, his scent flooding her lungs until she drowned in it. "You smell divine," she whispered faintly, the words slipping free before shame could catch them. "My lady," he said, voice roughening, "your corset is too tight." He called for assistance. No one close enough to hear. "May I?" She nodded, too dizzy to speak. His fingers moved to the laces at her front. Careful, precise. Each tug loosened the vice around her ribs, but his knuckles brushed the swell of her breasts with every motion. Heat pooled low in her belly. The bond flared, electric under her skin. She gasped when the corset finally released enough for a full breath. Better. His breath ghosted her temple. He relaced it looser, fingers hovering inches from bare skin. The restraint in his touch was its own torture. She could feel his wolf pacing just beneath the surface, whispering mine, mine, mine. Rosie looked up. His mouth was inches from hers. The small, dark mole at the corner of her lip seemed to draw his gaze like a magnet. His eyes darkened to molten steel. She didn't think. She rose on her toes, slid her hand to the back of his neck, and pulled him down. The kiss ignited. His mouth claimed hers, hot, deliberate, starving. One large hand cupped her face, thumb brushing the mole he had fixated on since the bath. The other arm banded around her waist, crushing her closer. A low growl rumbled from his chest, vibrating through her bones. Rosie answered with a soft, desperate sound. Her fingers tangled in his dark hair. She tasted cedar and storm and raw hunger. The bond between them sang bright, fierce, dangerous, every nerve alight. He backed her against a stone pillar without breaking the kiss. One thick thigh slid between hers. The pressure sent lightning up her spine. His hand trailed down her side, gripping her hip, pulling her harder against the unmistakable evidence of his arousal. She arched into him, lost. For one perfect, shattering moment, there was only heat, scent, the thunder of two heartbeats, and the wolf inside her whispering, yes, yes, claim him. Then guilt crashed in like cold water. She broke the kiss with a gasp, turning her face away. I should go. Her lips tingled. Her body ached. The bond pulled viciously, demanding she return to his mouth. Luther's chest rose and fell hard. His eyes still glowed faintly gold at the edges. He did not release her immediately, thumb still tracing the mole at her mouth, as though memorizing its exact shape. She slipped from his arms and fled down the path, corset half loose, lips swollen, the taste of him still burning on her tongue. Parasa waited in her chambers, posture rigid as carved ice. The moment Rosie crossed the threshold, the princess's gaze sharpened. The blushing, Parasa said, voice slicing clean through the air, needs to stop. All it does is enchant him further. He looks positively smitten. Rosie tried to school her face, failed. The memory of Luther's growl against her mouth still vibrated through her bones. You think he's smitten? She asked, the hope in her voice pathetic, even to her own ears. Parasa tilted her head, the faintest smirk curving her lips. She looked at her nails as though Rosie were something unfortunate stuck to the bottom of her slipper. Congratulations, the princess said coldly. You are now the single most useless saboteur in the history of any kingdom. The bond hummed louder beneath Rosie's ribs, a living chain that tightened with every breath. She was falling, and every attempt to push him away only drew her deeper into the fire. 5 days blurred into a war Rosie was losing. Each morning, she woke with Parasa's orders ringing like cold bells, and the bond humming traitorously beneath her ribs, warm and insistent, whispering closer. The first attempt was simple, be demanding. Parasa had drilled the words into her. Men loathe feeling like a treasury with legs. Ask for everything. Rosie practiced in the mirror, chin high. I want new shoes, and I am not sorry. In the garden the next morning, Luther waited beneath a flowering arch, reviewing documents. Sunlight carved shadows across his broad shoulders. The moment she approached, his scent cedar, storm, restrained hunger wrapped around her like smoke. She opened her mouth. I would like, he tilted his head, just slightly. The prepared demand dissolved on her tongue. If it isn't too much trouble, she finished weakly. Could I possibly have some new shoes? Luther's lips curved. Not mockery. Something softer, deadlier. How many? Within the hour, attendants flooded her chambers with boxes, jewelry that caught light like captured stars. 20 gowns embroidered with seed pearls and tiny sapphires. 50 pairs of slippers in every shade of silk. A note in his strong, surprisingly elegant hand. Wear whichever pleases you. Rosie sat surrounded by shimmering wealth and felt sick. The bond pulsed warmly under her ribs, mocking her. That evening, Parasa's eyes narrowed to slits. Did you at least sound demanding? Rosie could only shake her head. The second attempt came 2 days later. Luther asked if she played the pianoforte. He had heard the real princess adored it. Rosie sat at the gleaming instrument, placed her work-roughened fingers on the keys, and played. What emerged was chaos, notes colliding like startled birds. When the last discordant crash faded, silence rang. Luther clapped, slow, genuine. "I've never heard anything quite like that." Rosie's cheeks burned. "You're laughing at me." He crossed the room without hesitation and sat beside her on the narrow bench. His thigh brushed hers. Heat flared where they touched. "You are enchanting," he said quietly, voice low enough that only she could hear. "No matter what you do, you have completely bewitched me." The bond flared bright and hot beneath her sternum. Her wolf whined, pressing closer. Rosie stared at the keys, throat tight with self-loathing and helpless longing, each failure carved deeper. The jealousy ploy began unintentionally. She returned from a court gathering and heard herself say, too casually, that she was sure his long conversation with the noblewoman across the room had meant nothing. More accomplished women would naturally hold his attention. It was fine. She was fine. Parisa set her teacup down with deliberate calm. "You sound jealous." Rosie had no defense. "That is useful," Parisa said, tilting her head. "Use it. Imagine he chose you. Then imagine him leaving for someone better. Because that is what happens to girls like you." The words lodged under Rosie's ribs like glass. By the afternoon gathering, she was no longer performing. She stood by the tall window watching Luther speak with a beautiful countess, and felt real grief twist inside her chest like a living thing. He found her within minutes. His shadow fell over her. Cedar and storm flooded her senses. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she lied. He tipped her chin up with one finger. The touch burned. The small dark mole at the corner of her mouth drew his gaze again. "I know eventually you'll leave," she whispered. "This won't last." Luther's eyes darkened. He stepped closer until her back met the wall. "You are the only one," he said, voice rough velvet. "Since the night I found you, I have not looked at another woman. I could not if I tried. You have completely undone me, and I have no interest in being put back together." The bond sang bright, fierce, undeniable. Rosie kissed him. Not a decision. Gravity. Her hands fisted his shirt. His palms slid to her waist, pulling her flush against him. A low growl rolled from his chest as he backed her harder into the wall. One hand cupped her jaw, thumb stroking the mole at her mouth like a brand. The other gripped her hip, fingers digging in with barely leashed hunger. She arched into him. The kiss turned feral tongues, teeth, the taste of storm and want. His thigh pressed between hers. She felt the hard length of him against her belly and whimpered into his mouth. The bond flared white-hot beneath her ribs. Her wolf howled mine. He broke the kiss only to trail his mouth down the column of her throat, teeth grazing skin, breath hot and ragged. One large hand slid lower, bunching silk, dragging her harder against the rigid evidence of his need. The friction sent lightening up her spine. Her hips rolled against him instinctively, chasing pressure, chasing him. Luther groaned against her neck, a raw, broken sound that vibrated straight through her bones. His fingers tightened on her hip, holding her exactly where he wanted her as he rolled his hips once, slow and deliberate, letting her feel every thick inch of what she did to him. Rosie's head fell back against the stone. A soft, desperate moan escaped her lips. The bond between them thrummed like a live wire, flooding her veins with liquid fire. Every nerve sang. Her wolf clawed at her control, urging her to bite, to claim, to surrender completely. His mouth returned to hers, deeper this time, tongue stroking hers in a rhythm that promised ruin. His free hand slid up her side, thumb brushing the underside of her breast through silk. She trembled violently, knees buckling. He caught her instantly, pressing her harder into the wall with his body, caging her in heat and scent and raw alpha power. For one shattering moment, there was nothing but them. The slick slide of tongues, the grind of hips, the thunder of two heartbeats, and the bond screaming for completion. A door opened. An attendant's voice cut through the haze. "Your Majesty, the princess is needed urgently." Luther stilled. His forehead dropped to hers. Breath ragged. The scent of their combined arousal thick enough to choke on. He lowered her gently to the ground, eyes still glowing gold at the edges, jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped. Soon, he vowed, voice raw as an open wound. Rosie walked back to Paris's chambers on trembling legs, lips swollen, skin marked by his grip, thighs slick with want, the bond pulling like chains of molten gold. Parisa took one look at her flushed face, disheveled hair, and the faint scent of Luther still clinging to her skin like smoke. "You are," the princess said, voice ice over razors, "the single most useless saboteur in the history of this or any other kingdom." Rosie met her eyes, chest heaving, the taste of Luther still on her tongue. The bond hummed louder than ever, and she was no longer sure she wanted to break it. Parisa waited until the door to her private salon clicked shut behind them. The lock turned with a soft, final sound. Then she struck. "A compromising situation," she said, voice smooth as chilled wine. "You will be found with another man in a position that leaves no room for doubt." The words landed like a blade between Rosie's ribs. Rosie's stomach lurched, bile rose sharp and bitter. She pressed a hand to her mouth, swallowing hard against the sudden wave of nausea. "You want him to think Nothing will actually happen," Parisa cut in, inspecting her nails with aristocratic boredom. "We time it perfectly. The man is chosen discreet, cooperative, well paid. I would not ask you to truly sully yourself." Rosie's breath came fast and shallow. The bond beneath her ribs twisted violently, as though Luther's wolf itself recoiled at the idea. Her skin crawled. The faint trace of his cedaran storm scent still clung to her from the garden, now tainted by the poison of this suggestion. "I won't do it." The refusal left her lips before she could temper it. Paris's head tilted. The faintest smirk curved her mouth, cold and perfect. "Won't you?" She stepped closer, jasmine and frost filling the space between them. "Let me remind you exactly who you are, little maid." Rosie's pulse hammered against her throat. "You are a servant who stole royal wine, trespassed in the king's private chambers, stripped naked in his bath, and let him believe you were me, his betrothed princess. You confirmed it when he called you by my title." Paris's voice dropped to a scalpel's edge. "Theft, trespass, impersonation of royalty. Any one of those earns the work camps. All of them together. My father enjoys making examples. Prison at best, hanging at worst." Rosie's knees buckled. She caught the edge of a table, knuckles white. Parisa continued, each word precise, merciless. "And when the truth inevitably surfaces, when Luther learns he has been courting a floor-scrubbing nobody who cannot even read the treaties she would be expected to negotiate, what do you imagine he will feel?" She tilted her head again, the small smile never reaching her eyes. "Imagine he chose you. Imagine him looking at you the way he does now, soft, hungry, reverent. Then imagine the moment he discovers you are nothing, a liar, a mistake. That is what happens to girls like you." The silence that followed was suffocating. Rosie's vision blurred. The bond under her ribs pulled painfully, a living thread stretched to breaking. She could still taste Luther on her tongue from the garden, still feel the brand of his thumb on the mole at the corner of her mouth, still hear the raw growl he had made when he pressed her against the wall. Parisa watched her unravel with clinical satisfaction. "I love someone else," she said finally, almost gently. "A knight, low-born, he sees me, not the crown. If this marriage proceeds, my father will have him removed. Quietly. If the alliance fails, war comes. Thousands dead, borders burned, children starving." She took one more step, close enough that Rosie could see the frost in her eyes. "I cannot break the betrothal myself without destroying everything my father built. But you already started the crack." Parisa's gaze dropped to Rosie's trembling hands. "You will do this. You will be found in a compromising position. Luther will end the engagement himself, and you will finally be useful." Rosie's throat worked. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. The bond screamed inside her, Luther's wolf howling in protest, the thread between them thrumming with desperate loyalty. She thought of his kneeling form, the crack in his voice when he begged for a chance. She thought of the way he had carried her from the bath like something precious, the way he looked at the mole at the corner of her mouth like he wanted to worship it, and she thought of herself, maid, illiterate, nobody, standing in the way of peace, of Paris's love, of everything that mattered to people who actually belonged in this world. Her shoulders curved inward. "All right," she whispered, the words scraping her throat raw. Paris's smirk deepened, slow and satisfied. "Good girl." She turned toward the window, looking out over the sun-drenched gardens as though the conversation had been no more consequential than choosing embroidery thread. Tomorrow night, the blue receiving room. I will ensure Luther arrives at the precise moment. Rosie stood frozen, nausea rolling through her in waves, the bond beneath her ribs writhing like a wounded thing. She had just agreed to break the only man who had ever made her feel seen. And the worst part, the part that made her want to scream, was that some small, terrified piece of her still believed she deserved it. Luther followed the attendant through the quiet east wing, boots silent on marble. His wolf paced restlessly beneath his skin, drawn by the faint thread of Rosie's scent still lingering on his clothes from the garden. Cedar and storm rolled off him in waves, heavy with anticipation. The blue receiving room door stood ajar. He pushed it open. The sight hit him like a warhammer. A man had Rosie pinned against the wall. His hands were on her waist. Her back was arched, head turned away, body rigid with unmistakable fear. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Luther's vision bled red at the edges. A snarl tore from his throat as he crossed the room in 2 strides. His hand closed around the man's throat and slammed him backward into the opposite wall. Plaster cracked. The man choked, feet dangling. "Ronan, Luther, please." The voice cut through the red haze. Not the words, the terror in them. He froze. Rosie stood pressed against the far wall, eyes wide, breathing shallow. Her scent spiked sharp with fear, but underneath it, guilt. Thick, choking guilt. He released the man. The intruder fled without a backward glance. The room settled into deadly silence. Luther turned to her slowly. His chest heaved. The wolf inside him howled, clawing to protect what was his. "Are you all right?" His voice came out scraped raw. She stared at him as though he were a stranger. He took one careful step closer, then another. Her scent hit him harder: wine ghosts, kitchen herbs, and the faint trace of another male's touch. It made his stomach twist. "Did he hurt you?" "No," her voice cracked. "He didn't." Relief warred with confusion. He searched her face, the small dark mole at the corner of her mouth that had haunted him for days. "Then why do you look at me like that?" She swallowed hard. Her hands trembled at her sides. "I cannot marry you." The words landed like a death blow. Luther went still. The bond between them, the living thread that had hummed warm and bright since the bath, jerked violently. "I tried to tell my father," she continued, words rushing out. "He wouldn't listen. I didn't know what to do." "Why?" The question scraped out of him. Her gaze dropped. "There is someone else." The wolf inside him roared. Luther's hands curled into fists. The room felt too small, the air too thin. He could still taste her from the garden, still feel the way she had melted against him, the soft whimper she made when he pressed her to the wall. He stepped forward again. She flinched. That small movement nearly broke him. He sank to one knee. The alpha king, who had never knelt for anyone, lowered himself before her. His voice cracked when he spoke. "You consume me." The words came from the deepest part of him. "Since the night I found you in my bath, there has not been a single moment I have not thought of you, wanted you near. My only wish is to remain at your side, to make you happy, to be worthy of the way you looked at me that first night. His wolf howled inside his chest, frantic, grieving. Please, he said, voice breaking, just give me the chance. Tears slipped down her cheeks. You are so kind, she whispered, but I cannot be yours. There is someone else. I have already given my heart away. The bond between them screamed. Luther felt it like a blade dragged across raw nerves, the humming thread that had lived under his ribs since he lifted her from the water began to fray. He looked up at her, eyes burning gold at the edges. You truly do not wish to be mine. I cannot be. The wolf inside him thrashed. There is a mate bond between us, he said quietly. You must feel it. I know you do. She swallowed, tears falling faster. If you feel it and still choose someone else, reject it formally. I will not fight you. The silence stretched, unbearable. Her lips trembled. I reject the mate bond. The bond snapped. It was worse than any wound he had ever taken in 3 wars. The living thread that had connected them tore apart with a violence that stole his breath. Pain exploded behind his ribs, white-hot, soul-deep. The constant, warm hum that had lived inside him since that first night vanished completely. The absence was a void so vast it swallowed sound. Luther's vision tunneled. His wolf tore at the edges of his control, howling in agony. He took her hand one last time, brought it to his lips. The small, dark mole at the corner of her mouth blurred through the pain. I accept your rejection, he said. The words tasted like ash and blood. He rose on legs that no longer felt like his own, turned toward the door. He did not look back. The moment the door closed behind him, the shift ripped through him. Clothes shredded, bones cracked and reformed. The wolf exploded out of his skin with a howl that shattered every window in the east wing. Pain, rage, grief. He fled through corridors, past screaming servants, out into the night. The forest swallowed him whole. Behind him, in the blue receiving room, Rosie collapsed to her knees. The severed bond left a gaping wound beneath her ribs. She pressed both hands over her heart as though she could hold the pieces together. The emptiness was worse than death. And somewhere deep in the dark woods, the Alpha King's wolf howled again, raw, broken, endless. 10 days had carved Rosie hollow. She moved through the palace like a ghost, every breath scraping against the raw wound where the bond used to hum. The absence was worse than pain. It was silence. A cold, sucking void beneath her ribs, where Luther's presence had once pulsed warm and alive. Even the faint trace of wine that still clung to her skin tasted like ash. She scrubbed floors in a distant hallway, knees aching on stone, when raised voices drifted from the king's study. This is a catastrophe. An alpha's roar shook the air. Rosie froze, brush dripping suds. Your Majesty, we are doing everything. 10 days. The king bellowed. My daughter's betrothed has gone feral, and you bring me excuses. Rosie's heart slammed against her ribs. She rose without thinking and pushed the door open. 3 faces turned toward her. The old king, red with fury, the captain of the guard, armor dented and blood-stained, and Parisa, pale as winter marble. "What happened to him?" Rosie demanded, voice raw. "Where is Luther?" The king stared at her as if she were filth on his boot. "Who let this creature in here?" Miss Harrow rushed forward, grabbing her arm. "Forgive her, your majesty," Rosie wrenched free. "Answer me." Paris's gaze flicked over her, cool and calculating. King Luther lost control of his wolf. His chambers were destroyed. Guards who tried to stop him were harmed. He fled into the eastern forest. Search parties have failed. Some did not return. The floor tilted beneath Rosie's feet. Men had died trying to reach him. Because of her, because she had spoken 6 words that severed a sacred bond. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The void beneath her ribs ached so fiercely she pressed a hand there, as if she could hold the emptiness closed. "It's my fault," she whispered. The king scoffed. "Remove this delusional maid before I have her thrown in the dungeons." "No." Parisa stepped forward, voice like cut glass. "She is not delusional, father." She met Rosie's eyes. "You shared a mate bond with him." Rosie nodded, tears spilling freely now. "Yes, I didn't understand what it was. I broke it because you told me I had to." Paris's expression remained ice, but something flickered behind her eyes, regret, perhaps, or calculation. "Breaking a true mate bond is lethal for some," she said. "The pain drives alphas mad. Luther is feral, dangerous, unreachable." Rosie lifted her chin, trembling but steady. "I will go to him." The captain barked a disbelieving laugh. "He'll tear you apart, girl. You've seen what he did to my men." Rosie's voice rang clear, fierce. "My mate would never hurt me." The room fell silent. She turned toward the door, the void in her chest pulling like a lodestone toward the forest. Paris's voice stopped her. "Someone will escort you to the edge and lend you a horse." Rosie nodded once and left without looking back. The forest swallowed her whole. She rode as far as the captain would go, then continued on foot. The trees closed in, ancient and watchful. Heat still clung to the air even in shadow, oppressive and thick. She followed scent alone. Luther's trail was darker now, cedar and storm laced with blood, rage, and bone-deep pain. It hooked under her skin and pulled. Her wolf whispered frantically, guiding her through brambles and over roots. Hours passed. Her dress tore. Thorns raked her arms. She did not stop. At the heart of the woods, she made a vow aloud. "If he is lost forever, I will shift and join him. He will not be alone." A low growl rolled through the trees. Rosie froze. Heavy footfalls shook the ground. Branches snapped like bones. He emerged from the gloom. Massive, black fur rippling over shoulders broad as boulders. Eyes glowed feral gold, unfocused, wild. Power rolled off him in waves, alpha broken lethal. But it was him, her mate. "Luther," she breathed. His lips peeled back from enormous fangs. The growl deepened, vibrating through her bones. She should have run. Instead, she moved slowly, deliberately, and sank to her knees in the leaf litter. The wolf prowled closer, massive head lowered, teeth bared inches from her face. Hot breath washed over her skin. The scent of his pain, sharp, metallic, endless, filled her lungs. Rosie tilted her head back, bared her throat completely. The ultimate submission. "You don't have to be lonely anymore," she whispered. "I'm here." The growl faltered, became a questioning rumble. Then he struck. His jaws closed around her throat, not crushing, but claiming. Teeth pierced skin. The bond that had been severed exploded back into existence with brutal force. Pain and ecstasy tore through her at once. The broken thread rewove itself in fire and light. She felt everything: his grief, his rage, his desperate relief. The bond slammed home like a hammer strike, humming violently beneath her ribs, brighter and stronger than before. Her vision whited out. When it cleared, the wolf was gone. Luther knelt above her, naked, breathing hard, eyes still glowing gold at the edges. His hand braced beside her head. Sweat and blood streaked his skin. The small, dark mole at the corner of her mouth drew his gaze like a beacon. He looked half feral, half human, utterly undone. Rosie reached up with shaking fingers and cupped his jaw. "Rosie," she whispered. "My name is Rosie. I'm not a princess. I'm a maid. I clean floors. That's all I am." His breath hitched. The bond between them sang alive, electric, unbreakable. And in his eyes, the first spark of recognition ignited. The forest floor was soft beneath them, moss and fallen petals cushioning bare skin. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, silvering Luther's shoulders as he hovered above Rosie. Eyes still edged with gold, she cupped his face with both hands, thumbs brushing the sharp line of his jaw. "My name is Rosie," she whispered again. "I'm a maid. I clean floors. I lied to you from the first breath." He searched her eyes, breath ragged. The bond between them thrummed violently, hot, alive, demanding. His wolf pressed against the surface, whispering mine with every heartbeat. "I know," he said, voice rough from disuse and raw need. "I knew before the garden. I let it continue because I wanted you to choose me. Not the crown, not the lie. You." His thumb traced the small dark mole at the corner of her mouth, reverent, hungry. "Claim me," he growled. The words vibrated against her lips. "Make me yours as you are mine." Rosie rose to meet him. She pressed her mouth to the strong column of his throat, felt his pulse thunder beneath her lips. Then she bit down. The bond ignited. Fire and light exploded through both of them. The severed thread rewove itself in molten gold, stronger than before, sacred, unbreakable, dangerous. She felt every fragment of his pain, his relief, his centuries-deep loneliness finally answered. He felt her guilt, her terror, her love. A raw groan tore from his chest. His arms banded around her, crushing her to him as the bond sealed with brutal, exquisite finality. Then there there was only need. Their mouths crashed together, hands roamed desperate, claiming. He rolled them until she straddled him, silk remnants of her dress tearing away like paper. Skin met skin. Heat met heat. The scent of cedar, storm, and her faint, lingering whine filled the night air. Rosie sank down onto him in one slow, trembling motion. The stretch burned beautifully. Luther's head fell back, a guttural growl escaping as her body took him fully. His hands gripped her hips hard enough to bruise, guiding her, steadying her, worshiping her. They moved together, slow at first, then deeper, harder. Every thrust sent the bond singing brighter. Her nails scored his chest. His teeth found her throat again, not breaking skin this time, but marking, claiming, owning. Pleasure built like summer lightning. Rosie's breath fractured into soft cries against his mouth. Luther's control finally shattered completely. He flipped them, covering her with his body, driving into her with powerful, relentless strokes until the forest echoed with the sounds of their joining. When release took them, it was mutual, white-hot, devastating. The bond flared so brightly, the trees seemed to glow. They clung to each other, trembling, hearts hammering in perfect sync as the aftershocks rolled through them both. Afterward, he held her against his chest, one large hand splayed protectively over her back, the other stroking the mole at the corner of her mouth with endless tenderness. "Rosie," he murmured, tasting her name like wine. "My Rosie." She smiled against his skin, exhausted, sated, finally home. The return to the palace was quiet. Luther carried her the entire way, naked and unashamed, her body wrapped in what remained of his cloak. Guards and servants scattered at the sight of their king, feral-eyed, victorious, carrying a maid like she was the greatest treasure in the realm. He never let her feet touch the ground until they reached his chambers. In the weeks that followed, he taught her letters with patient hands and quieter voice. She traced symbols on parchment while he watched, thumb occasionally brushing the mole at her mouth, as if reassuring himself she was real. Parisa came one afternoon. She stood in the doorway, elegant and cold as ever, but the frost in her eyes had thawed to something almost human. "The alliance holds," she said. "My father has accepted my marriage to the night. Quietly, no war, no scandal." She looked at Rosie, at the woman wearing simple gowns, but carrying herself like royalty. "You were never meant to be a princess," Parisa said, tilting her head with that familiar aristocratic disdain. "But perhaps you were always meant to be queen." Then she left, taking her secrets and her love with her. Epilogue. 1 year later, the summer heat still pressed against the palace walls, but the marble bath in the king's chambers held cool, scented water. Rosie sank into it with a low sigh of relief. 8 months, heavy with their child. Luther steadied her from behind, his chest solid against her back, arms wrapping around her swollen belly with reverent care. "Better," he murmured against her ear. "Much." His hands spanned her stomach. Their child kicked firmly against his palm, He laughed low, delighted, the sound vibrating through her bones. I seem to recall a similar bath, he said, voice warm with memory. Though you were considerably smaller and considerably more drunk. Rosie smiled, leaning her head back against his shoulder. I was very drunk. He pressed a kiss to the curve of her neck, right where his mark still lingered. I was completely undone, he whispered. I'm going to marry this girl, and I don't care what it takes. She turned just enough to meet his eyes, the small dark mole at the corner of her mouth, catching the light. You thought that while I was naked in your bath, asking you to get in with me. Approximately 30 seconds after you told me I had a nice voice. Their laughter mingled, soft and intimate, until it turned to kisses, slow, deep, full of promise. The water grew cold around them. Neither noticed. Luther rested his forehead against hers, one hand still cradling the life they had created together. Thank you, he said quietly, voice rough with emotion, for climbing into my bath and for never letting me be lonely again. Rosie kissed him once more, slow and sure, the bond between them humming bright and eternal beneath their skin. In the quiet that followed, there was only warmth, only destiny, only them. If you made it all the way to Rosie sinking into that bath 1 year later, thank you. Truly, I pour a ridiculous amount of heart and heat into these stories every single week because I love seeing which ones hit people the hardest. And wow, the messages, the comments, the I need more Luther right now energy. It's been incredible lately. You're making this so much fun. So if Rosie climbing into that bath and accidentally stealing an alpha king's heart did something to you, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm and me this story deserves to reach more people who crave possessive mates, class tension, and baths that change everything. Drop a comment. Tell me your favorite moment. Was it the wall scene, the forest claiming, the mole obsession, Luther kneeling? Be as unhinged as you want. I read every single one, and they make my whole week. Subscribe/follow so you don't miss the next one. I've got a whole backlog of these standalones waiting, and the spicier, more intense ones are coming faster because of how much love the last few have gotten. Want even more? Bonus Luther POV chapters, extended epilogues, and early access to the next story drop on my Patreon. Link in the description/bio/pinned comment. Thank you again for reading, for feeling it, for screaming in the comments. See you in the next bath, or forest, or throne room. Until then, stay deliciously undone. Purple Heart Nightbond Narratives loved Rosie and Luther's messy, steamy journey. Like plus comment your favorite scene plus subscribe so you never miss the next one. These stories keep getting hotter because of you. Let's keep it going, fire.